Governor on his way in that unfortunately, the weather kept a few cities away and some members away. But I do think that for those cities that are here, maybe a little extra in their LGA check next year would be warranted. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Governor Tim Walz. By way of introduction, I just want to tell one quick story. So when I started with the firm, early in my time here, Governor Walz was then, of course, Congressman Walz. And I'm sitting in my office, typing away, kind of minding my own business, and I hear behind me, which, as you all know, is the sign that Tim Flaherty is behind you and has something to say. So I spin around in my chair and I'm like, hey, what's up, Tim? He's like, I just had the weirdest phone call with Congressman Walz. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, well, yeah, he wanted to know about LGA and housing and broadband. And mind you, this is like in 2008, 2009, back then. It was just weird. It was just really weird. I'm like, well, what was really weird about it? He's like, I talked to the congressman for like 15 minutes and he didn't even ask for money. and so I think what that says, what that speaks to, is Governor Walz's long-time, really sincere, really authentic interest in communities across the state, the stuff that makes communities vibrant, the stuff that makes all of our communities in greater Minnesota places that people want to raise a family, places that we can do business, and that places that are thrive and really are part of the fabric of the whole state. And so with that, I'm going to be quiet. We're going to turn the floor over to Governor Walz. Governor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank all of you for the work you do. This has been a group of leaders that I have very much appreciated working with over the years. I certainly know that I've learned more from you than you from me, but understanding what my role was as a member of Congress in the 1st District, absolutely counting on this organization and leaderships and the ability to bring coalitions together to solve our problems. So I'm really grateful. And I do think it's Minnesota, so I told my staff, they wrote up some talking points, nothing on the weather. I'm like, oh, that is lame. It's that. It's Minnesota on the coldest day of a generation, we've been told. I did get to think about this, though, that we always make these comments. I don't believe it is ironic that greater Minnesota representatives are in the Twin Cities today, on this day. That's what we would normally say. Because greater Minnesota cities and greater Minnesota leaders understand and knew long before I started saying it that the way we prosper is by one Minnesota. The way we understand that this economy is stretched across the state. That operating principle, because it wasn't just a campaign slogan, came from the works that people in this room did and do every day of understanding how we build not just city leadership, we build county leadership, we build regional leadership, and understanding that we're all stronger for it. And I saw that manifested in many different ways. I was always, my time in Congress, just so impressed when organizing around transportation, like the Highway 14 Coalition, is that you would bring in business leaders, mayors, local, all the city council, county commissioners, and you would have the mayor of New Ulm advocating for a section of highway over at Waseca with a clear and distinct message and an understanding that New Ulm's economy was dependent on Waseca's economy or Mankato's economy or Rochester's economy or any one of those communities along the way. And it was that mentality all along that got me seeing it. And I would talk to members in Congress. The idea of building coalitions and sometimes counterintuitive coalitions absolutely seems like the natural order of things, but what I found out in Congress is it's relatively unique to the Midwest and especially Minnesota to try and do this. So that genesis of how do you get the state back together at a time when the country federally was moving further apart, more polarized, those Minnesota values, that one Minnesota value was very, very apparent with all of you. And during the last year and a half or so, traveling across the state, I saw such wonderful examples of why we're fighting for some of the things we care about, why this organization cares so deeply about transportation. And I want to be clear, responsible use of taxpayer dollars to build infrastructure that creates safer and more economically viable communities. That's what you've argued for. So I'm clear up in Halleck. And just to be clear, the folks in Halleck and other places, some of you know this, teach you about this. When they hear this division of urban versus greater Minnesota, they understand clearly that that's not true. There are grades and differences all across this state. There's suburban, there's exurban. And then they say greater Minnesota, they say when you live in Halleck, you're in frontier Minnesota. That is an entirely different way of approaching it. And it actually impacts the decisions that have to be made, and the local leaders know best about that. So we're clear up there on a gravel road. Some of you might have been to this. They've gotten some notoriety because they're really good. There's a distillery up there called Far North Spirits. And I have been told by friends that it's really good. I'm sure that's the case. And they're a prosperous business. And they also have like a little restaurant attached to them, whatever. And they're on a gravel road. And they have spotty internet access and all that. So they are obviously talking about the need for infrastructure in terms of highway, bridges, townships, counties, all of that, state highways, and talking about broadband. They were also talking about the need to make sure that there was adequate housing so their workers could be there in Halleck, which is something that is a concern for all of you. But then the owner said something really that I think summed up what you know and what this One Minnesota value is she says to me, I'm really hopeful that you do a really good transportation package, a really vibrant transportation package to include highways and bridges, and talk about the gas tax and how it would be used. We're supportive of that. But we are also incredibly supportive of Metro Transit and the things they do in the Twin Cities, because 99% of our product is shipped into restaurants and bars in the Twin Cities area, and if people can move efficiently by transit to and from those places where they're able to buy our product, we make money. And if we're making money, greater Minnesota and Halleck is thriving. So they saw the connection clearly, tied around transportation, tied around housing, tied around our common need. And so for us, listening and learning from you, it shouldn't be any surprise to you. And our mantra as an administration with Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, myself, and our commissioners with all of you is, you'll never be surprised, and the people impacted by the decisions we make, like a budget, are going to be at the table. So this coalition of greater Minnesota cities, this coalition of leaders across there has been at the table with me in Congress for 12 years, and you have been here on this time as we're starting to formulate this budget. So we're here to tell you we're listening to you, we're hearing you. I am certainly going to tell you that we are going to put together, and I talk, these things take investments. We didn't do tax conformity. That's going to have to be done. I accept the responsibility to try and get that done. We didn't do anything with the provider tax, and we have the potential to drop off hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans for healthcare, skyrocketing rates, especially in greater Minnesota. We've got to deal with that, and we have kicked the can down the road on transportation for too long. States across this country with Republican governors and Republican legislators have found a way to increase the gas tax and use it wisely, especially at a time when there may be some challenges. This is a natural order of things in economic growth that has been over 10.5 years. There'll be a natural cycle to this. That job program that comes with the transportation package focused on greater Minnesota highways and bridges as well as transit is exactly the right way to go. So you should expect in the coming weeks to see a budget that is reflective of those values, that has robust investments in infrastructure, that tackles once and for all or gets and does a moonshot type of an approach towards broadband in greater Minnesota. We don't have time to wait till 2025. Far North Spirits needs to sell their products today. They need to be on the internet. Our kids need to get that world-class education that the internet provides, whether they're in Wilmer or whether they're in St. Paul. It does not matter. So that budget that I keep talking about is going to be a fiscal document, and it's going to be a moral document, and I think you can expect to see that. We've also talked about 3 pillars that we're focusing on. We're focusing on education, we're focusing on healthcare, and we're focusing on community prosperity. On the education piece of this, I am not going to have children's education be dependent on their race, or their socioeconomic status, or their zip code because of a property tax base that puts them at a disadvantage and forces communities into continuous referendums just to try and hold pace with others. That hurts us economically. It hurts us as a state where we're trying to build a workforce. That is our strongest advantage of any place in the country, is our work ethic and the high quality of our workforce. We are going to be struggling to fill those jobs. We cannot afford to lose one single child that's homegrown here. We need to have responsible and compassionate immigration reform, all those things you care about there that will need to make a difference. When it comes to healthcare, again, the time of the bickering over insurance reform and all that is long past. Let's figure out a better way to keep our people healthy. If they get sick, let's figure out a way to make sure that they have affordable health care. And let's not dodge the fact that once we start to see consolidation or changes in healthcare, many of your communities out here know what happens, and the folks from Albert Lea are certainly very aware of this. The potential to never have another child born in Albert Lea again, or have it where it goes. I'm not saying that we have the solution to that right now. What I'm saying is it's going to be people in this room, along with our healthcare providers, along with our business communities, to figure out a way to make sure that that accessibility and affordability and providers in rural areas keep our community strong. And then that third piece is the community prosperity. All of these things have to do with you. This one especially has to do with you. I trust you know how to make the decision. I trust that we need to deliver on that. That's why you heard me for a couple years, and I made no bones about it, whether it be the gas tax. And some of the numbers that were thrown out there were by my Republican friends, and they told everybody what we were going to do. Well, thank you. People still voted for us anyway, so they believed it, obviously. But we were very clear to the public. You don't get to talk about things you're going to do and not figure out how you're going to pay for it and how you're going to have a fiscally responsible budget. And I think to this room that I made it very clear, our intention in a budget is to restore local government aid to the 2002 levels. That was the pledge that I made. Hand in hand, and I think the number you're talking about is somewhere, and I know my staff's I'm not supposed to be so specific as we're still doing this, but I think it was $30 million, and we think that's a number that complements county programming aid, that those two go hand in hand. With a robust infrastructure package, with an attack as a moonshot type of approach towards rural broadband, to an equalization in how we fund education, and to making sure that our citizens have access to health care, and that we approach some of the things that make this state, again, so appealing to people coming in, that this is why they want to come. It's a high quality of living with incredible communities that have the things that you know you need in your community. So we're going to launch forward on some of the things you heard me talk about on community prosperity grants that allows you as leaders to make some of these decisions, of freeing up some of those things, that the state's job can be responsible for making sure those resources are there, and you can take them and run forward and build on what we can do with the private sector. So on the 19th of February, we're going to be unveiling a budget that I think is going to be transformational. I think that voice, as we were very clear about, is going to include one Minnesota, all of Minnesota, some of those inequities, and it's not us saying we didn't get ours and they got theirs. I don't think we were strategic in building the partnerships that had people who live in Minneapolis and St. Paul cheering for a restoration of local government aid, because what it can do for Ely, or what it could do for Albert Lea, or what it could do for Austin. All of those things that they know that matters, and having folks up in Halleck cheering for the Met Council to be successful in transit, because that builds the jobs that we need. So we've got a session that has started out, and I think this needs to give thanks. And we always had a saying in our office that you shouldn't expect to get a pat on the back for doing things that you're supposed to do, but the bar is kind of low right now, is that we are like getting along and working bipartisanly, so that's a pat on the back now. But I do want to give appropriate thanks to Paul Gazelka over in the Senate, doing an incredible job of communicating with us and continuing to talking. We're going to differ on issues, that's perfectly fine, but already setting some targets to try and finish on time, to try and have the debate some of the things that we care about. And I think it is to be noted is that during the shutdown, the unforced error that came, it was Democrats, Republicans, it was faith leaders, it was business community, it was mayors from greater Minnesota and the Twin Cities coming together and saying this is not the proper way to do that. So when we held a news conference on how the state of Minnesota was going to stand together on this, when Minority Leader Doubt came and spoke for the need for that, those things need to be called out. I tell the press this all the time, I get it, that you only cover the planes that crash, not the ones that land. But in politics right now, the ones that land are the rarity. Tell those stories. Those are the ones that you should be covering. At this point, it's early. I get it. People tell me it's a honeymoon period or whatever. I think all of us have learned a lesson in Minnesota. This is a state that works. It's a state that governance on the issues that are most important to us, we can find compromise on. If we're listening to local leaders and empowering communities to make those decisions, we're going to get better outcomes, we're going to get better stewardship of our taxpayer dollars, and we're going to get a better chance of each of our communities seeing why the others are valued. So I know you all know this, you've heard me say this line a ton of times, but it's absolutely true. I am preaching to the choir, but what I'm asking is for the choir to sing loudly for the next 3 months, to be there, to talk to people, to build the coalitions, to try and find ways to get people to yes on things, and to try and find a way that you can help all of us compromise on the things that help each of you improve the communities that you're here to represent, improve the business climate of the communities you're here to represent, including every single corner of the state. So we're hopeful. We look forward to, once our budget comes out, that you see yourselves reflected in it. You see the work that this organization has done reflected in it. You see a vision that extends beyond, because again, I'm biting off a big chunk on transportation. We are $18 billion short over the next 20 years. And those who think, well, use some of that surplus. Oh, that always works out well when you spend the surplus really fast and then there's no dedicated stream for it. And then, oh, who would have guessed the economy was going to downturn? Nobody ever gets to say that again, by the way. Who would have guessed things would go bad? All of us at some point in time. But good fiscal management, like you do in your businesses, like you do in your communities, warrants that some of us have the courage to do something for the next generation, because these investments that we make, they may not be realized over those next 20 years of trying to do that. But if we don't get a start on it now, we're going to lose our competitiveness. We're going to lose our opportunity for people to have one of the greatest freedoms that this country and this state offers, the choice to live wherever you want and raise your children, knowing that no matter where you're at in Minnesota, you're going to have a good quality school, you're going to have safe transportation, you're going to have access to internet and a business environment that allows you to grow the way you want to. So that's our commitment. We're off and running. We look forward to seeing you many times. We look forward to you building coalitions, and if there's times to ask us to come, we will. If there's times to ask us to stay away, we'll stay away if that helps. But this office is committed to following through on the things that we talked about on the campaign trail, not just because we thought of them, it's because we listen to Minnesotans and we know these things are improve our state. So thank you for having me, and stay warm. Thank you.
So